All right, it is 12:30 p.m. and I call to order the ad hoc committee meeting of the Board of Trustees. This committee is charged with the responsibility of reviewing Section B, School Board Governance and Operations. The committee will review all B policies and make recommendations to the board at large for revisions to these policies. The district is in compliance with South Carolina Freedom of Information Act by notifying the media of the date, time, and place of the meeting. The district tapes the meetings for accuracy in preparing the minutes. Do I hear a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
Approve the agenda as presented.
Have a second? Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Committee members, you have received the minutes of the February 22nd, ad hoc committee meeting. Other than corrections that have been received and made, are there any other corrections?
No.
Hearing none, the minutes will be accepted as presented. At the last meeting, we tabled several policies due to our time limit. Do I hear a motion to take from the table policies BBA and BBA-R, BC, BCA, BCB, BD, BD-R, BDD, BDD-R? Second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Repeat those policies to just make sure for the record.
From memory, if you will. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, so thank you again for your time, committee, and we will pick up where we left off. And this is going to roll directly into BBAA, Board Member Authority and Responsibilities, to include the administrative rule associated with that as well. So we will start with the policy itself, BBAA. You have received both the current as well as the proposed draft from South Carolina School Board Association, and I will open it up for discussion.
Just a second. Okay. Can we talk about the addition of items to the board meeting agendas?
So that's going to fall under the administrative rule, the -R, and so I would say.
Oh, you want, okay.
I would
Okay.
say let's first go through the BBAA.
Okay, and then
And
do the
then that'll
BBAAR.
cover,
Okay.
then that would fall specifically to the administrative rule.
Okay.
So as you can tell, one of the things the School Board Association did was in drafting the model policies, they have eliminated the purpose that's at the header
At the top.
of our most of our policies, and so you'll see a deletion of that. All in all, a lot of this language was kept complete as we went through as we go through the review of this. One point I had was in paragraph, and this is of the draft, 2, 3. In paragraph 4, it starts with board members will interact. The language sounds really kind of odd. Will not give orders to any subordinates of the superintendent. That seems just, I don't know, I'm just not a big fan of the subordinate term. I think there's probably a better way to phrase that. That just seemed a little, I don't know. I wasn't a big fan of that terminology. I mean, I agree.
So-
I agree with the principle. I agree completely
Right.
that our relationship exists to the district through the superintendent. So I agree with that. I think there's a better way to say will not give orders to any subordinates of the superintendent. And there is possibly some language in later policies that may be that we maybe can replace or implement.
So what would you suggest, any other personnel, or?
Yeah, just the term subordinate. I mean,
Yeah,
that
that's just-
seems like a
that's
very
just-
old term.
It is,
that,
been used for half a century at least.
Yeah, and I don't know, it gives just an odd vibe to me.
So really, all the subordinates of the superintendent are employees
Of the
of the
district.
district.
Correct. You can see.
So, so the new one states the same first sentence where it says, and will not give orders to any subordinates of the superintendent, either publicly or privately, period. And then it says suggestions and recommendations regarding the administration will be made directly to the superintendent. The former one says the board and its members will deal with administrative services through the superintendent and will not give orders to any subordinates of the superintendent, either publicly or privately. So I think we all agree with that, just changing the subordinate to district employees, maybe?
District employees, district personnel.
Yeah.
Anything other than, I
Right.
think, subordinates.
But the former one says, but may make suggestions and recommendations. And I guess the new one's saying we can make those suggestions and recommendations, but we have to make them to the superintendent where he or she will choose to take action, I guess?
Yeah, I think the
I don't know.
clarifying point to that would be that, again, in an attempt to preserve the board superintendent relationship, and not to supersede or work around the superintendent, that we are working through instead of around. That,
Yeah.
at least that's how I take that.
Yeah, I would interpret it that way.
Okay. And so, and obviously, if you look at the BDD, board superintendent relationship, I mean, it kind of further stipulates that. It just broadens the terminology. And so, so we're in agreement changing subordinates to district personnel.
Well, hang on, I'm going back and forth. Yeah, either of those terms is fine. What did you say? District personnel?
Correct. Now, and if you, again, if you look at BDD, board superintendent relationship, under the bulleted points, it says communicate with staff members through the superintendent. And so that terminology used there is staff members. Again, we may want to link those two up. I mean, we could either say staff members here, or we could say district personnel and then link it in BDD, communicate with district personnel through the superintendent. You know, again, just looking for consistency of language, instead of having 7 or 8 terms for the same group of people. One other note I had, questions, requests, complaints, other information presented to individual board members outside of a board meeting by members of the public should be referred to the superintendent. I think that is kind of that's kind of an important piece, sort of a clarifying point that we may want to have some discussion about, in that,
It almost makes it sound like a suggestion instead of this is what we're gonna do.
yeah, I think
We
it's.
should, or we will.
Right, right. I think it's a situation where, you know, if a concern is brought forth, say in a board meeting, a concern is brought forth, and then it's referred to the superintendent, who then directs it to the proper chain of command, if you will, making sure that we've worked through all of because again, in our role as a board member, if we serve in a quasi-judicial manner, obviously, any hearing we have of that prior to it hitting our desk could be problematic and one in which we would have to recuse ourselves. And so that's why we look to work through that chain of command to make sure, and I'll be honest, I don't, as a board member, I don't necessarily know the proper chain of command in which to work through, you know, whatever the situation may be. And so that's why I think it is important to kind of refer that through the superintendent. But I don't know if that's enough. I mean, it says public should be referred to the superintendent, and then it's like this ... you know?
Well, I think, though, it's items that require action. So if someone is requesting something or complaining about something that needs to be corrected, we as individuals can't take action at that. But I mean, if there's a question and we can answer it, there's nothing saying, I mean, there's no reason we should have to forward that email and have the superintendent reply if we can reply ourselves.
Correct. I think the important part, though, and probably the part that's being highlighted is the individual board members. And so obviously we can't act as individuals, you know, anytime we reply, you know, to a question from the community or whatever it may be, the reply is, while this is not the stance of the board, this would be my opinion, blank, blank, blank. But I think this is more, well, I don't know. I mean, that brings up a good point.
Right, the requests and complaints require action. The questions, maybe.
I guess my question is, once it says should be referred to the superintendent, do we need to add to that? For further clarification, for further investigation, for further whatever it may be?
I think your hangup may be the questions part. Because I agree. I mean, you have, if somebody says, well, why do we do such and such in middle school? And you may have an answer for that. I read that as things that go beyond that particular piece. So you get a question that you don't have an answer to. So instead of, you know, reaching out to somebody to get the answer, it's coordinated through the superintendent's office. Is what I envision that sort of the next level sort of stuff.
So action items, and I get the big picture of us working through the superintendent, but geez, it just doesn't seem efficient sometimes. I feel like if I could email Luke Clamp or Mary Gaskins a quick question, they can reply. I mean, I don't know, but that's a.
Well, see, that's something I had to catch myself because I worked here with these folks for so long. I knew who to call. I just called somebody. But that's not the protocol here. It's not. The superintendent should be aware, I think is the point.
Is what this is saying, that.
Even if it isn't really nothing, you know, he should be made aware. And if it needs solving, then you solve it or have personnel.
I think that the challenge for leadership, the challenge for leadership is really more about seeing a pattern and identifying themes. So, for example, if someone had a question about middle school English, and they asked you that question, and they asked you the question, and they asked you the question, and the three of you individually reached out to other people, I would never have known that I don't have one question, I have three questions. And that might actually mean something more substantial in terms of action, right? So it may illustrate a misunderstanding or something, but if you have three different questions from three different people who live in three different areas, and they all have a similar question, and it never goes through my office, I miss themes and trends like that. So that's one of the things that it helps me identify, you know, are there common misunderstandings or whatever, or, you know, I'm complaining about, you know, whatever. I hesitate to give an example, but I'm sure there's a number of examples, but if you have all 7 of you going out contacting people for those individual answers, I get left out of the loop in terms of trying to put patterns together. That's why it helps me.
And I look at it from the preservation of the chain of accountability. So just like we have a chain of command, inherently within the chain of command is a chain of accountability. And so, for example, I can, as a board member, I cannot professionally go hold a district employee accountable for those actions because they do not report to me directly.
Oh, yeah.
It's only to the however the organizational structure of the organization is. And so, you know, the only person we hold accountable is the superintendent. The superintendent then holds his personnel accountable. The community holds us accountable. And so I see that as more of a preservation of the chain of accountability as well.
So, looking forward to current board members and future board members, would then kind of the rule of thumb, I'm thinking as we do board training or something, I mean, are you saying copy this? I'm just telling you, your inbox will explode. But copying the superintendent on every email reply, or like how
you know, I think there's a difference
does that look?
when the community reaches out regarding whatever the question may be. I think since we are held accountable by the community, I think the community has a right to know, you know, how we may think about something or feel about something. Does that reflect the stance of the board or the stance of the district? No. That again is our, you know, would be our personal viewpoint on that. And so again, I think it's just a mechanism of accountability. And so I mean, I would envision that the same way as if Dr. Little were to CC us on every email regarding anything that hit his inbox. Well, you know, it would be very hard for me to speak to a lot of those things, quite frankly. So again, not necessarily disagreeing with any of the language or anything presented. I just thought it was important to review this part to see if we needed to add anything additional, or are we okay with just sort of ending it there at the superintendent for then, you know, further direction. I guess that was my only question.
All right, so just clarifying, the only change that we're gonna make would be changing subordinates.
To district personnel.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Okay. Moving on to the administrative rule. Open this up for discussion. I think specifically, Kathy, you had a question.
The agenda, yeah.
Agenda, so this would be highlighted area 3, requesting addition of items to board meeting agendas. Yeah, even the South Carolina School Board Association puts in, you know, the options of,
right.
you know, there are other ways to address this, and so certainly having some discussion around it will be important. What are your thoughts?
I don't know. Sometimes I feel like it could open a can of worms because goodness, if Tim's like, I want to talk about this, and you're like, I want to talk about this, and I'm like, well, I want to talk about this, and there's 5 things to add to an agenda, and that could get really, could fill up the agenda before we even get to the new district stuff that we need to talk about. But we need to have a way for us to add stuff to the agenda. So, they put their option like 3 or more vote, a majority of people. So, I mean, we'll just take this past meeting. We met last week. So on Tuesday, could we have said, hey, I'd like to discuss this, like have an item on the agenda where someone could say, hey, I'd like us to discuss this at the next meeting. And if X number of people want to discuss that, it would be added to the April agenda or May agenda. And we could say each time we can have up to 2 board requests for the meeting, like so that it doesn't open it up to 15 different things.
So you're trying to do away with majority?
No. I'm saying like if there's something you'd really like to talk about, I don't even know. We'll take dress code because that was on the agenda last time. If back in November, I wanted to talk about it and I asked for it to be on the agenda and it wasn't, and I asked the next month and the next month and it was never put on the agenda. I'm saying that at a meeting, a board member could say, I'd like to discuss this. And if it was the will of the board to discuss that, we would have a say in putting it on the agenda for the next meeting. But not having 20 of those kind of things, but having an opportunity for us to have a say in something on the agenda. Because right now, I mean, we can email the board chair or the superintendent, but that doesn't guarantee we can get something added to discuss.
Sure. My perspective on this would be, I'll play my hand a little bit here. I think in total, I think our meetings in and of themselves can be quite challenging for everybody. It can be challenging for everybody from the district who's in attendance. I think it can be challenging for the community to stay here late at night. I think it can be challenging for us as board members. When we're having some of these 5 and 6, hour meetings, I wonder how effective we become after hour 3, quite frankly.
Not very.
Really,
Yeah.
I mean,
No,
that's why I would almost be a firm believer, and this is something we can discuss further as we move down the road, but, do you put, time limitations on your board meeting itself? I mean, I think and Dr. Little can speak to this in a second, but I think when he and the chair sit down to discuss the board meeting agenda, well, I obviously think you're being conscientious of what you think the time may be, but again, it's very nebulous. It's operating within these ethereal kind of ideas. And so I think if we were to have a defined time to say, okay, our board meeting is limited to a structure of 3 hours. Okay, so within 3 hours, we're going to look for the most efficient way to operate this board meeting. I think there's something to be said for that, for further discussion. To your point, I think there has to be a mechanism for any board member to have the ability to at least bring forth an agenda item for potential discussion. Now, it may be that we want to talk about athletics,
Right.
but Dr. Little says, you know what? We're actually working on this really cool thing. It's going to take about another 6 weeks to flesh this out, to bring some hard data, some whatever it may be. And so while we could certainly address it in the next board meeting, it may be better 2 board meetings from now, or whatever the case may be. I think.
right, and that's great, but at least the members had that opportunity.
Exactly.
To request that.
And so as I look at how would you accomplish that, I do think there is a mechanism by which you could put an action item on there that agenda items for request could be a part of a vote, a majority vote to say, well, yeah, we all sit there like, man, I would like to hear something about athletics.
Yeah.
And so if enough of the board members feel that same way, it's okay. So we'll take a vote on that. Again, seeking input from the district to say, is there something we're missing here that would, instead of us addressing this at the next board meeting,
We need a little
we
extra
need to,
time to
yeah,
get
we
this
need a
stuff
little extra time,
together.
push it
We
further down the
can,
road. I think that would be a very actionable way of allowing a board member to request an item to be added to the agenda for the next board meeting. The other way around, it almost feels like the chair would almost sit in judgment of the request of the agenda, which I would agree that none of our chairs really want to do. I mean, nobody wants to sit in judgment of, yeah, we're going to allow this, we're not going to allow that, because you're really kind of putting yourself on an island, and nobody wants to do that. If this is the will of the board, and the board wants to hear about athletics at the next board meeting, so be it. Tim?
I agree. I think we should stick to that.
Now, where are you seeing this at?
Can I put in? Dr. Guyton, that was, yesterday I emailed you. This policy was the one that started the discussion about
Right,
moving,
right.
and that was the first draft. I
Gotcha,
think
okay.
Dr. Little's reading from some language.
no,
from
no,
that-
you're fine.
that
We-
first
You're
draft
fine. We just need to
that I
open
emailed
up.
you. Do you all
look at-
need a copy of that? Would you like
I
me to
have
get
it
you a copy
here.
of it?
I mean,
Okay.
Yeah, because I was only referring to the
Okay.
draft center by South Carolina School Board
Okay.
Association.
Okay, yeah, that was, yeah, okay.
So was that whenever,
That was the first reading that we did, and we had put up, I think that was in August, and that was when there was discussion, and that was when the committee was created to review this policy specifically, if you recall that.
yeah, yeah.
So I had emailed you all yesterday the copy of that draft in case
saw
you
that.
wanted some language from that, and I think that's what Dr. Little's looking at
Okay.
right there, so.
Yeah, I guess I didn't even
Yeah.
take that one into
That
consideration.
means I have 3 drafts. I've got
So you've got the
the
original.
original, that one,
and
and
then-
this one.
Yeah, yeah.
Correct.
Okay,
Would you
so
like me to
I-
get you a copy of that?
Well, I may have
Take a
read,
look at it.
anyway, well, one of the things that's in this one is that what the responsibility of the superintendent will do upon that request.
Right, and the draft of the South Carolina School Board Association essentially does away with that and sort of condenses it to, and I'll read it to you. A board member wishing to suggest an agenda item will notify the board chair and/or the superintendent, and the decision will be made whether to add the item to the agenda. If board members request the addition of an item, it will be added to the agenda. So the context of this conversation is around changing that to reflect a majority vote at the preceding.
Yeah, actually, I think,
Yeah, but here's, this is what I want, because on this other one kind of speaks to that. So what I would request, though, is that in the one we did this summer, said 6 days, 6 business days ahead of time. The challenge is as we prepare for the actual board meeting, a lot of work is taking place kind of in that time period, right? Like that's where it's, especially 6 days ahead of time, we're finishing up all the presentations, we're finishing up the board packet, all those kinds of things to look at. So if the superintendent then is going to be asked, well, how much of your staff's time and resources will be taken, that then will require extra research.
Right.
So what I would recommend is if we're going to do something like that, I think we just need to give me like 8 business days. I need a little more time, I think, just to make sure that we've got everything together, plus we're doing whatever research on this particular agenda.
But I think
So-
if it were a vote on an action item,
you would have like a
you would have
month.
the entire month.
Yeah, I think the way I read it was that someone would just request. So like Kyle would email you 6 business days before and say, I'd like to discuss an agenda item to discuss athletics. And that would be put on that next agenda for us to vote on for the next month
To
to be.
approve it for the next one.
Right.
Okay, Well, I mean, the other one said that too. I just wanted to make sure if there's an action item that we need to take to support that request, we just need as much lead time as possible.
Right.
And so my question is really 6 days ahead of time
Yeah,
enough
I would argue
time
that's
to
I
any
would
lead?
say that's
sufficient.
not.
No, that's not sufficient time, but I would think a 1 month, time frame would likely be sufficient, unless there were extenuating circumstances that, again, by delaying it just even to the following board meeting would further provide more clarity or more information. So I guess the point here would be, a board member wishing to, so we probably have to change this entire paragraph.
Well,
And
do
so
you
read
have
the,
the?
yeah, read the administrative.
So this one says, a board member wishing to suggest an agenda item will notify the board chair and/or the superintendent in writing at least 6 business days prior to the meeting at which they desire the board's consideration of the proposed item. And then it says, the proposed agenda item must be within the scope of the board's duties. And then it says, it will be placed on the agenda for approval at the next meeting. At the next meeting, during discussion of the item, the superintendent will provide the board with an estimate of the time and staff resources that will be required to prepare for a thorough and appropriate discussion of the proposed agenda item.
And I will say, so traditionally, this has not been a huge issue for us, but I do want to point out something you said earlier that I would also concur with, is, based on what Dr. Guyton just said as well, some limitation to how big you want that ultimately to be
Right.
is really up to y'all. But I mean, again, if we have a busy board meeting, and then we just want to do open discussion about whatever. I think about kind of what that would look like in terms of a meeting. Again, although traditionally that's not really been a big issue, at least over the last 6 years.
requests by
But
the
we
board to
don't
add
have
to
a
the
ton of
agenda.
requests. But
Right. It's just nice to have something in place in case someone does have a request.
So do we want to put time constraints? So it sounds like the structure, the proper, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but the way that reads would be, we have our upcoming board meeting in April. Okay.
Correct.
6 days prior to that, I would email the superintendent and say, I would like to request agenda item athletics be added to, or placed for consideration.
Yes.
Then the board, that would give you 6 days prior to the board meeting
It would,
to say, okay, athletics, they don't want to talk about it at this board meeting, but they may want to talk about it at the next board
can you
meeting.
have it ready by May?
Can you have, everything aligned and ready, updates ready for May? And so then at the board meeting in April, there would be a vote taken by the board to say, yes, in fact, we do want to hear about athletics, and then it would become an agenda item. Or you could present at that point, hey, after researching this, we have found that delaying this until May would behoove us because it would allow us some additional.
Or June or something.
Yeah.
Exactly. So is that how everybody reads that?
This,
Correct?
the one Tracy sent
Yes,
yesterday.
Yeah,
from
the
me,
one
yes.
Tracy sent yesterday. Okay.
Yes, that's how I read that.
Any objections, thoughts?
That way it's a whole board decision. It's not, yep.
Yep. So we will, so Tracy, revising
Under the.
so which one are we going to work off of? Are we going to work off the one that you sent or work off the South Carolina School Board Association and add that language, replace that language in
Yes.
here? Okay. All right. All right. And that was one of the items I had too, along with your thinking, Kathy, is, how do we, because things that people may have in the community come up and ask me about, and it's like, well, I don't know about that.
Right.
So, and again, I think this is also a good way for all considerations to be made for all board members. I would agree, absolutely. Legal opinions. This is one that I have had similar question about, because this gets, at the heart of it, this gets into spending money. I mean, really, if we think about it, with the way we are currently structured, any request we have to an attorney is going to potentially come with that a price tag. It's going to have some sort of monetary consideration. And so I think with that, we have to be prudent about the way in which we request these items, because if Kathy spends $10,000 a year on legal opinions, but Kyle spends $500, it seems different. And so I think there's a better way for us to accomplish this. The only clarifying point I would say is that at the last board meeting, when we were discussing budget provisions or budget considerations, priorities for the upcoming year, one of the board members had spoke to the idea of having in-house legal counsel, which I think likely does away with a lot of these types of considerations, because we've already paid for that service, if you will. And so if I request a legal opinion in capacity as a board member, I should be able to go to our in-house legal counsel to field that question. And then if it falls outside the scope of that person's expertise, then in my opinion, the board would have to then solicit that legal opinion, not Kyle Guyton, would be my thought. That's my thought. So again, I'll open it up to Kathy and Tim. Y'all.
So even with the in-house model, would we not have some kind of protocol as far as going through the chair, or we just go to the in-house legal service?
Yeah, I would think, because again, this would speak to your personal concern as an elected official. And so I don't foresee you having to work through anybody for that consideration, for that legal opinion. It doesn't cost the district any more, I think is an important part. But if our in-house legal counsel were to say, I don't know, and we were to then, you were to say, okay, well, I don't think I'm still not quite comfortable here, I would like to have a formal legal opinion, then I think it could go before the board, and the board could say, okay, do we want the Attorney General's opinion? Do we want to actually pay an attorney for legal opinion? I think there's a multitude of layers that you have to consider. It's not just a carte blanche question that can be asked. And I mean, you have to think about, what if you don't get a comfortable answer?
I think you could refer back to your earlier policy that you just talked about. And I'm not sure which of these I'm actually looking at any longer. Hang on.
So many numbers.
BBAA. Your 1, 2, 3, 4th paragraph down really already addresses that. Board members will interact with district administration through the superintendent. I think kind of the same thing would work with that as well.
If it's an in-house person, you mean?
And just to manage expectations on an in-house person, remember, there are all kinds of, there's a variety of fields of legal expertise when it comes to education. I mean, you have special education law, human resources law, real estate law, more general type of things. So one individual will not necessarily be an expert in all of those things, but you'll have someone who, you'd have somebody who generally understands legalities and those kinds of things for sure. Would be, I mean, if we did that position, that would be what we're really looking for.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to be mindful, are we writing this of the mindset that we would have in-house counsel, or just of the mindset of legal opinions, big picture?
Honestly, I think I would write it for both, because since it is a year-to-year budget that's adopted, you may have funding one year, you may not have funding the next.
For an
And so,
attorney.
I think I would take it from the perspective of writing it in such a way that there's a mechanism for in-house referrals, and then there's a mechanism for outside questions to be answered. So I'll request for.
So what's current practice right now? Current practice is you contact legal counsel, board chair contacts legal counsel, board chair.
And I certainly contact legal counsel for sure. And, Devonna Price, Mary Gaskins, senior leadership team works through that depending on what we're working on, if it's a special education situation or whatever it may be.
So, I haven't had one yet, but if I had a question, a legal question, would I go straight? Should I go straight to you, the board chair, or could I pick up the phone and call our attorney?
Well, I
The
would hope
question.
you'd talk to me, and then we would, I would think of anything, when we talk about board and superintendent responsibilities, and take you out of it and take me out of it, we would just think about like
Right, we have to
20,
think
20
big
years
picture,
from now,
yeah.
right? Whatever that may look like. I think the thing to remember is any policy that encourages communication and collaboration between the board and the superintendent, I think is very positive. Because I would tell you that the relationship, in my humble opinion, the most important relationship in our district is the relationship between the board and the superintendent, because that really sets the tone for lots of things that take place. So anything that encourages the communication, I would hate, again, I think the idea is when you have a question, if you're going out and talking to other people, I think that impacts perhaps the superintendent-board relationship. I think in terms of this particular thing, if you had a legal question, I think talking to the superintendent first, and then if they really feel like we need something beyond that, I think there's a conversation to be had there as well. I just think anything where you collaborate, communicate between the board and superintendent is always, always, always a good model.
So with what he said then, the sentence that says a board member wishing to obtain a legal opinion will bring such a request to the full board. So then my question is, do we need to take up the full board's time? If you have a legal question and you go to Dr. Little and he's like, yeah, we should look into that, do you need to bring it to the full board for a vote?
I guess the way I envision this is there's two types of questions that can be asked. There are items specific to district administration, educational practices, whatever it may be that would require a legal opinion. Yes, I think that is in the purview of the board superintendent relationship. I think there are some questions though that would fall outside of that that could also be sought for a legal opinion. So for example, in the capacity of an elected official, so in my capacity as elected official, can I blank? Okay, well, obviously, you don't want to have to weigh in on that.
Right.
You're not an elected
It's
official.
true, not my business.
Yeah, you're not in the business of that. And so that's one where you would not want to run that through the superintendent because it's just nonsensical. I think there certainly anything within the purview of district educational policy, whatever it may be, anything that would affect the district, I would think, yes, you would want to because again, we're talking to, in this scenario, our own in-house legal counsel, who again does not report to us, would report to you. And so in preservation of the previous policies, you would work through the superintendent to gain access to the expertise of that individual employee of the district. At the same time, though, I think you have to counterbalance that with there are legal opinions that can be sought that fall outside the purview of the district. And I'm not talking personally, I'm talking professionally as a board member, that would not operate through the district, but would instead operate through the full board. Because we all may have the same question. Can I blank as a board member? And so instead of the district attorney being asked 4 times from 4 different board members, it's one question that was brought before the entire board. That seems to make a little more sense in my mind, I guess. Tim?
Well, I think, again, we hold this guy accountable.
Right.
And if something's going on legal or whatever, I just think you should know about it, because it may be something he's gonna be held responsible for down the road. And if he doesn't know about it, how can we hold him accountable for it? So I think communication is important. You know, any of us got a question, I think it should, and for that matter, you know, other board members should know.
And I guess it almost, these first 2 sentences argue against themselves to some degree. All requests for formal legal opinions from the district legal counsel regarding board issues will be directed through the board chair or the superintendent. A board member wishing to obtain a legal opinion will bring such request to the full board. Well, which is it?
Right.
Is it the full board, or is it the chair, or is it superintendent? I mean, it's,
Sounds
And
like
formal legal opinion, is that like just from the district's legal counsel? Is that attorney general? Is that, you know, I don't know.
and then again, I think that can be a part of the discussion. So I would probably,
It feels like there's a transition sentence that's missing.
there's something
Between-
that's,
Because you have a step, and that first step is through the board chair and the superintendent. I mean, there's a step there. Perhaps if the superintendent and board chair decline, or, I don't know, I mean, it just feels like there's something missing in there, because as you said, it's like they're talking about 2 different things.
yeah. Do you just strike the first one? The first sentence?
A board member wishing to obtain a legal opinion will bring such request to the full board.
A majority vote must be obtained to initiate a request for a legal opinion.
that's gonna take care of communication with the board chair and the superintendent.
Yeah.
It's redundant.
So just strike the first.
So then my question would be, how would they bring that to the full board? Would it need to go? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, if I have a
So the
request, I
mechani-
can't just in the middle of a meeting raise my hand and say, I have this request. I feel like it kind of needs to go through the board chair and superintendent, because they set the agenda where we would then
I think it
bring the
refers back
request
to
to the
your agenda
full
item.
board. Yeah, so I think,
I mean, that's essentially, the mechanism by which it would be brought to the full board would be requesting the addition of an item to the board meeting agenda. So essentially, you're utilizing the mechanism we just spoke about regarding adding items to the agenda.
Or just keep the first sentence and add, and will bring such request to the full board.
so directed through the board chair or superintendent, and will bring, okay,
Yeah.
such request to the full board.
Everybody's.
Or who, who will bring, yes.
Was that an owl?
Kyle and I both went, who? Okay, great.
So read that for us.
So all requests for formal legal opinions from the district's legal counsel regarding board issues will be directed through the board chair or the superintendent. So that's, Tim said, keep that. And then, but say, who will bring such requests to the full board?
I need to add one other thing for you, though, okay?
Another who.
Just one little thing to remember. whomever the board chair is may need to utilize legal opinions in their serving as their role as board chair. Like, how do I respond to this request, or is there something here? I think that one, well, I guess that's considered, I don't know, well,
I think
now
that
I'm
would
gonna get into the
fall-
weeds. Do you want to get under formal legal opinion, or do you not want to get in formal legal opinion?
I think that would fall more into the duties of the chair.
Okay,
When we get to that part,
Okay.
that would, I would reserve that discussion for that part.
okay.
Oh, that's fair.
Now, should we clarify again, when it says district legal counsel, comma, in-house or, and/or,
Hired, contracted, do we, I don't.
and/or contracted,
But do we contract with legal?
procured?
We,
Well, let me, any in-house person, and we probably wouldn't refer to him as attorney, it'd be kind of like, as we've been thinking about this, as director of legal services or something along those lines. You know, that person is probably going to have a job outside of just, you know, instead of walking down the hall, hey, you know, what do I need to do about, you know, my car tax issue or
Right.
whatever, right? I mean, they're going to be doing work that we have in-house. But I guess if a question is going to them, I don't know that y'all want to vote on a question that you may have every single time going to that, through me to that person. I mean, that will be incredibly cumbersome. You talked about that a little bit earlier. I mean, that would be an incredibly cumbersome process and slow. I mean, if you have a question about something, and we just had a board meeting last night,
You probably need to answer sooner
you're,
than later.
yeah, I mean, you're not gonna get that, because, and you're gonna vote on it. Okay, let's say it was March when did we have our last board meeting? March the 17th, or March 15th it was, right?
Yeah.
Let's say you had a question that you need to propose on March the 16th. You won't be able to vote on whether or not you
Right.
can ask that question till April 26th. And then that question will be presented to you
May 10th.
in May. That feels fairly inefficient, especially if there's some type of time sensitivity associated to it. I just don't know. So if you're going to say all, just be careful when you say all, because
maybe
if there is somebody in-house, that in-house process should be pretty efficient. I mean, that's one of the reasons you would vote to have that
In-house counsel.
in-house person.
And I guess that's technically more of an informal legal opinion at that point.
Correct. Well,
Whereas
because
this-
remember, the Director of Legal Services, and just to manage expectations, we've done our research on this, it is not to be
Right.
the district's attorney.
Right.
Okay, just to be really clear, it would be to manage these types of things, but then
But they would be
ultimately,
a legal expert in the sense that
correct.
they should be able to,
I mean, they should be able to answer a lot of general
Day to
questions, or at least to
day,
provide
yeah.
a pretty good opinion on it.
or know who to reach out to
For
get.
sure. Oh, definitely that, I mean, definitely the last part, but, you know, just as an aside, I mean, it is I don't know, again, I think the idea is that you want that to be a more efficient process. That's the reason you have an in-house person.
So,
So honestly, I would, in thinking about it, I would just keep it as district's legal counsel, because there's additional board policy to come that addresses the school attorney, district attorney. So there is further ones to come that we'll discuss later, which I would think would give further delineation to that. Just like the chair, you know, requesting legal opinion, you know, there's additional information to come from that. So give us the sentence one more time, Kathy.
so are we going to keep the all at the front?
Tim, Kathy?
All requests for formal legal opinions or requests for formal legal opinions? I guess it doesn't matter, does it?
I mean, I kind of like how it reads request, but That's up to y'all.
without the all?
I just would do it with a request.
Okay. So how about this? Requests for formal legal opinions from the district's legal counsel regarding board issues will be directed through the board chair or the superintendent, who will bring such requests to the full board.
Majority vote.
And then a majority vote must be obtained to initiate a request for a legal opinion. Any opinion provided will be disseminated to the full board. Board members with personal legal questions should seek advice from their own private attorneys. And so you said later we'll address who the district's legal counsel
Yeah,
is.
so in policy BDG, Board Attorney Legal Services.
Okay,
That's further, and if you look at this page 2, it goes on, that paragraph goes on. Tim? You good with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that our third one? Is that the second one? Is that the first one?
no, it's the second.
Hey, it's good. I don't
And
wanna-
then are we keeping the media one the way it is?
Yeah, so I
Yeah.
think there's some questions here. I guess I view this in two different perspectives. I think there are two types of requests that we get. I think one is the actual request from the media, and then I think there's a request from the community. And in my mind, those are two different things. And so I agree, I think the board has to have a spokesperson to stand in front of the microphone. And in our current structure, that person is the board chair. And so I think while that doesn't preclude an individual board member from standing in front of the microphone, it does preclude them from saying, this is the will of the board. This is, again, it's clarified with, this is my personal opinion. So I think there is that, but then I think there is, at least in practice, the way we have done this is when we have received questions from the community, ultimately that has fallen, if someone emails all of this, that has fallen to the, to be answered by the chair. And in my mind, I view those as two different circumstances because the media is one thing, that request, that sort of formal. Again, I see this as the formal versus the informal. I think from a community perspective, again, the community elected 7 people. So the community may want to hear from 7 people regarding their thoughts. While it's not the stance of the board, this may be their personal thought, to which the community is perfectly entitled to that. And so I think it almost needs that responding to requests from the media, and then, in my opinion, there needs to be responding to requests from the community.
Okay.
And I think the addition of,
But would that, oh, never mind, sorry.
no. I guess, how would that work logistically? I mean, I could almost envision a email address that says board@lexington1.net. And then a part of that, community member emails in board@lexington1.net. It's disseminated to all the board members, and then there's an automatic response that's given. You may receive, so this has been forwarded to the board for their review. You may receive individual responses from individual board members. Again, I think it's not meant to work around the superintendent. It's not meant to not include, but again, I think we're talking about two different capacities. I think we're talking about the capacity as an elected official versus the capacity of district operations and working through district. So we would never respond regarding district operations without working through the superintendent. If the community requested Kathy's opinion on athletics, we don't technically have a mechanism for that. And I think it's somewhat confusing to the community. How do I how do I get how Tim feels about athletics versus how do I get how Kathy feels about athletics versus how does Kyle
Just
feel?
reply to email.
Yeah, I mean, that's, again, it's just something for consideration. I don't know if it should always be the chair that has to respond on behalf of the board regarding a
I guess
community
that's
concern.
just precedent that's been set.
That's kind of been
but
the
not
precedent.
defined.
That's correct. I think it's been precedent. I think it's just been a way of operating, at least for the, now going on 4 years I've been on the board. That's the way in which because, admittedly, because that has been our precedent, anytime a community member sends something to all of us, I usually do not reply because the board chair is the one replying. Again, we don't have a policy per se for that, but that's been the modus operandi, all right? If they individually email me, well, yes, I attempt to communicate back. So I think it's a point of consideration, and honestly, it may not even be one that comes out of this committee. It may be we need to further discuss with the full board.
I kind of see it as if someone emails all of us, she usually replies all, and I usually just reply.
Mm-hmm. And two, we also have to be sensitive to open meetings, and we also have to be sensitive that, if all of us started replying all to,
Right,
all of
that's
a
why,
sudden,
yeah,
then
I
we're
don't-
conducting a meeting. No,
Yep,
we
I
can't
don't
do that.
reply. I mean, the board chair
Right,
does
right.
with it, I mean.
Yeah, no.
obviously, Right.
But I'm saying if there's exchanges that begin to occur where, now 4 people from the board have now replied into this, well, now it's almost as if you're conducting a meeting. And so obviously not something we want to have as a part of our precedent, if you will.
So if we're just looking at responding to requests from the media.
Well, kind of, may I ask, I'd hate to put her on the spot right here, but Ms. McPhail, what are your thoughts and opinions on that?
I think that as long as you say it's clear that you're responding on behalf of yourself as a school board member, or Kathy or Dr. Guyton, if you say, this is my opinion as a parent of a student in the district, I mean, you can say that as well. That's fine, long as you're making it clear that you're not responding, on the behalf of the school district or as the board. I think that's fine. Now, we like to ask that you let us know that you have done that. Of course, that's just a courtesy. You don't have to do that. And that's just so, sometimes it's good news. We hope that it's good news. And so that we can be aware that we can share that good news as well if you're speaking on behalf, or just so that we can be aware if there is an issue even, of that there's something going to be out there. So, I mean, I don't think that would be an issue as long as you're making it clear that you're not speaking on behalf of the entire board.
And you're speaking specifically to
To
requests
the
from media.
To the media. And as far as the email, that makes me a little nervous. I understand what you're saying as far as an email that goes to the entire board, like a board at Lexington One, and we could, of course, help you create that. But you do have to be careful when you're going back and forth that you're not creating a quorum.
Right.
To, and getting a citizen involved in that who is unaware that they may become involved in that. So you would just want to make sure that that did not happen, and that could easily happen without anybody meaning for that to happen.
Yeah, it would have to be one directional only. It cannot be a 2-directional platform. And again, nothing we have to decide at this moment. We can certainly bring this up for discussion when we present this to the board, for consideration. I certainly don't have any issue at all with the media requests. My only question would be, do we need to address community requests?
And I think every time I've spoken to a community member, a lot of times they'll call and they expect an opinion. And, I always clarify, it's just Tim Oswald talking.
Right.
I'm not speaking for anybody else. So.
Right, absolutely.
But I'm always happy to refer the media to the district office.
Well, maybe we'll just make this as a point of discussion.
Yeah.
For the actual presentation. All right. Any other questions, qualifying remarks regarding BBAA-R?
No, sir.
Okay. Looks like two. Moving on to policy BCA, Board Member Code of Ethics. So this one was recently revised as of 2017. Contextually, there was really not much change. I believe.
So, hold on.
Yeah, they highlighted a section, but honestly, I don't know if I note any change within the section that they highlighted. Other than they eliminated purpose.
Yeah, they got rid of
and-
the purpose.
Yep, they eliminated purpose and reworked the first paragraph. But again, really not a whole lot of substantive change. This was more of a grammatical changes, I believe, that occurred.
Yeah, so I'm going to read the first part. Because of the importance of the board's responsibility to make decisions related to the district's educational program while maintaining effective relationships with school administrators, staff, and the community members, the board will conduct themselves professionally in accordance with the level of responsibility bestowed upon them by the public. What does conduct themselves professionally mean?
Now, where are you at?
Aren't you on board member conduct?
I'm sorry, I had BCA as next.
Oh, I have BC next, sorry.
We see what?
Just BC.
That's what I had to.
You have
You're right.
BC?
You're right, I had it
Okay.
in the wrong order.
Sorry.
My mistake.
That's why I didn't see the highlighted thing. Okay, board
Yep.
member code of
Yep.
ethics.
Yep. Correct. So BC, board member conduct. The board will conduct themselves professionally in accordance with the level of responsibilities bestowed upon them by the public. And your question was, professionally? What does that word add?
I mean,
Professional.
right, but I think that's interpreted differently.
We're professional board members.
Right, so, yes. Well-
I'm just picking at you.
No, I know what the word means. I know how I interpret the word. But is there any definition in there? I mean, professionally, in order to be a professional board member, you have to be in attendance. You have to, like, is there any, do we address decorum? Do we?
I think it's adhering to these responsibilities is ultimately being professional. I don't think there's professional, and then we got to do this. This is what we got to do to be professional. That's the way I see it.
The bullet points beneath you.
The bullet points define the professionalism, which I like the bullet points. Yeah, I mean, these bullet points are great. I just didn't know if we could or should include anything else in there. I mean, we're representing this great district here, and we want to make sure that our behavior, our conduct is becoming of us as elected officials. But I'm fine with all the bullet points.
Yeah, I guess when I read it, professionally is dictated by these bullet points. It is.
So there is no definition of professional behavior. I mean,
This is it.
it is, okay.
I have Kyle Guyton's definition of professional behavior. You know, I think, obviously, professionally, I think you understand your lane. You stay in your lane. You operate with decorum. You operate with the the sense of working with and amongst anyone you come in contact with. And so I think we probably all have some varying level of the term professionally. But ultimately, I think the bullet points kind of highlight what those are.
Yeah.
You could eliminate it. It still says the board will conduct themselves in accordance with the level of responsibility bestowed on them by the public. Then you have it is the responsibility of each board member. That actually connects it even further to the bullet points.
I kind of like having professionally in there, honestly, because I think it adds a little weight to it.
I like the word professional, I just feel it, I mean,
And we could certainly, you know, as we look further at additional policies, code of ethics, for example, the one I jumped ahead to, some of those things, I think those are really more financial motivations
yeah,
and those
ethics, I
kind of
think is
things.
financially.
Conflict of interest really doesn't apply in this. So really, if you're looking for a, you know, some harder language in there, this would be the place to place that.
Right, I mean, so, for example, Kyle, you get angry one night and start cursing, and, I mean, I know that's not your character, but I mean, there's nothing we could do about that, or you don't show up, you don't, maybe that's just on the board member, and when it's time to be reelected, the community will speak. I don't know.
Personally, yes, I think that speaks to the chain of, again, the chain of accountability, that we operate in a very public and open fashion. And so the way in which we conduct ourselves is viewable by all. And I believe the people who put us there get to make that opinion every 4 years regarding what they think of our professional nature and our professional character.
So that's where the accountability falls.
To me, that's where the because again, it's the law doesn't allow us to sit in judgment of another board member and behavior with respect to their elected capacity as a board member.
I mean, I guess you even see that with like House of Representatives when they're making votes and they post who was yays and who was nays and who wasn't there to vote, you know. I guess I can't say, you can't say that bad word in a meeting, you know. That might be my personal opinion.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly have the ability to censure, and you've seen that play out in various districts, and so there is the ability to censure a board member upon majority vote by the board. But again, I think the true test lies with the community itself. And so the community gets to form that opinion of what is professional behavior. So any concerns, questions, additions, deletions? Or are we okay with the, again, eliminating purpose? It expounds the first paragraph, but for the most part, the bullet points stay intact.
Yeah, I think they're good. Unless we want to say work with love and harmony.
I like that.
Just a little levity, I think.
What the world needs.
That's what the world needs, right?
That's right.
All right. So now we'll go to BCA, Board Member Code of Ethics. No changes. We will accept as presented. Okay. So this again eliminates purpose, consolidates first paragraph. Again, this was a 2017 revision, and so not a lot of substantive change. Again, I would probably be a little bit wary about changing too much here, as this is, there is a lot of legal opinion regarding this, and Ethics, Government Accountability and Campaign Reform Act. There's a good bit of law cited. I would say, now obviously that does not preclude us from asking questions or seeking further clarity on any items, but does anybody have any suggestions, questions, or concerns?
The part highlighted, is that the part that's been added?
No, it's still a part of the previous one. I'm not really sure why they highlighted that.
Okay.
They did have a guide.
Okay.
Yeah, highlighted language is yours. Yeah, so they basically incorporated our own language into this.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that one was.
Well, and quite frankly, Kathy, I think this speaks to your previous concern regarding professional. And as you look at professionalism, a board member should honor the high responsibility that his or her membership demands by becoming well-informed concerning the duties of board members and proper functions of public schools. Again, to me, that's one of the critical aspects of professionalism, is understanding what you're doing. And placing a proper weight on it to include, and I like the term honor, honestly. Questions, concerns? Everybody okay with this?
BCA, yes.
Tim?
I'm just reading the part about payment and reimbursement for actual and necessary expenditures for travel and subsistence or attendance at speaking engagements, conventions, or other meetings at which he and she is scheduled to participate. That's referring to something other than us going to a conference as a board member, right?
I take that as that, because it says it will not be considered a breach of
Oh,
ethics.
okay, I'm sorry, I read that wrong.
And so it's saying, okay, if you go to a conference, you go to the annual conference, yep.
Yeah, I
Yep.
neglected to read that will not be considered.
Yeah, you've got two will nots.
Yeah, I
That's
think
a little bit of the confusing part,
I was thinking I
where,
was in breach there for
Yep.
a moment.
Right.
Well, always remember, the reason there's a will not is because somebody's already done it.
that's true.
So what you're reading there in those bullets, my guess is it's been done before.
All right, moving on, policy BCB, board member conflict of interest. So again, a lot of this is governed by the Ethics Act. The addition here is, so while there was a lot of grammatical changes, there was some substantive change after nepotism. You will see the draft copy includes employment and volunteering prohibited. And there has been some questions amongst the board itself regarding this. And so I think it's worth some conversation, mainly around a board member is not permitted to serve in a volunteer position in the district as she would have responsibility for a curricular, co-curricular, extracurricular program or activity or students and would report directly to the superintendent, principal, athletic director, or other school administrator. So I think that one really hits home that board members can't be coaches. And I think there's a legal opinion,
Can't be quiet.
cannot be coaches. So like you cannot be a baseball coach or basketball coach because, and they cite it here, the Attorney General's opinion 2016, a master-servant conflict would arise if a board member were to serve as the head or assistant coach, even on a volunteer basis. and as a trustee of the board in the same district. And I guess the thought would be, if you're that coach, you could say, well, I'm going to go ahead and say, let's do $100,000 to my team. And so as a trustee, you would have certain consideration and delineation over that process, and so it seeks to eliminate that, which I think is absolutely a good thing. The question has arisen, does that apply to chaperoning?
The question, that was really where I was gonna get to, or, I mean, when you say volunteering,
I mean,
does that mean Ms. Henson is not allowed to go read in a classroom?
Right, or we're doing some of those passages, I think, where we go, you know,
You're
To
judging
schools.
the passages,
yeah.
and you're giving feedback to students on that kind of thing? I mean, that, again, what you said when you said volunteering and then said coach, a position, I think you need to define it as a volunteer position.
Right,
I don't
it
think
does
it's
say position.
volunteering. I think that has a much broader
So like a-
context. I mean, Mr. Oswald may want to, do band concessions for, Gilbert High School
Yeah.
host a major band competition where they're going to have people taking tickets and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, or a parent volunteering with a field day or
Well,
something.
well, for any number of years, I volunteered as a sideline physician for some varsity athletics, and, and there's been a number of times I've been at a game and somebody has gone down and they've requested some assistance, and policy or not, I'm not gonna let some kid sit there and suffer because policy says, you gotta,
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
you gotta handle what's gotta be handled, and so, yeah, I don't like this. It seems way broad, and I think it needs to be narrowed, because a lot of our board members too, not just thinking about our board, but future boards, they're gonna have kids in the district. They may want to go on the trip to Riverbank Zoo. They may want to chaperone that. I did it one time. One was good for me. I mean, whew.
Hey, listen, you think Riverbanks is bad, Ashboro is
Man.
a lot worse.
Man, we were going Rover all over the place. It was, I thought I had things figured out, but I did not. It gave me a new respect for teachers and instructional assistants, I can promise you. But, yeah, I think we do need to narrow some language here. So any suggestions?
I mean, I agree with the employment part.
Absolutely.
So then, not permitted to serve in a volunteer position. Well, I think it actually does clarify, because it says serve in a volunteer position as he or she would have responsibility for curricular, co-curricular, extracurricular program or activity. So maybe change the as word. So serve in a volunteer position in the district where he or she would have responsibility for curricular, co-curricular, extracurricular programs or activities. Because I don't think field trips fall in under curricular, co-curricular.
You don't report to the superintendent or principal either.
Yeah, so I would really just change that one word. A board member is not permitted to serve in a volunteer position in the district where he or she would have responsibility for curricular, co-curricular.
And you have to fulfill both of those requirements.
Yeah, and would report directly to the superintendent, yeah.
Should you qualify it, but may serve in other volunteer capacities?
I mean,
Yeah.
that would clarify.
Yeah,
I mean,
that
that would turn, if you added a sentence on the end,
Yeah.
this does not include field trip chaperones,
Yeah, it seems like you need some
concession
sort of,
stands, et cetera.
I think you need some sort of clarifying statement
I like that.
at the end, so, or the school, here's whatever sort of.
So, for example, I read this is that Kathy could not be the PTO president
Well, that deals with financial
At-
stuff and, yeah.
at Meadowland Middle School.
Correct. I would agree with that.
That, yeah, you
But-
could not be the athletic booster club president or serve on the athletic booster club board of directors or whatever for Gilbert. Same thing, Mr. Oswald couldn't do that for the, on the band boosters or something. I couldn't be an assistant, or I guess I'm not on board, but like, you couldn't be an assistant coach for your daughter's middle school
Right.
basketball team.
Right.
You couldn't even volunteer for that.
Correct.
Right.
But you could be chaperoning, and those kinds of things are different. Again, when you use the term volunteer, I think that's the thing you gotta be careful of, because again, we understand it on March 22nd, 2022.
But someone reading it
But
10 years.
4 years from now, 5 years from now, will they understand that was the spirit of the?
So should you eliminate volunteer there? So a board member is
Oh,
not permitted to serve in a position
position
in the district, as she would have blah, 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 blah,
where
blah.
he or she would.
And
have her- yeah.
then at the end, or other school administrator, comma, but may serve in other
Volunteer
volunteer
capacities.
capacities.
I like, yeah,
Good with that?
yes.
I think
Tim?
you got that
Yep.
one.
Good.
You got that, Tracy? So correct.
Yep. So I think that successfully addresses.
Mhm.
that.
And one quick, just question note, under nepotism, it says, no immediate family member of a board member will be employed as a teacher without the written approval of the board. So they can be employed any other position in the district other than superintendent or teacher.
It's a strange, that feels like
And-
there's a legal opinion behind that.
Right, and so
It's
then my
very
question is,
specific.
with the crazy need for teachers, hopefully, I mean, I guess leave it if there's a legal opinion on it, as long as you guys would definitely bring it to the board for us to vote, because I mean,
No, that does bring up, but it actually does cite the actual code of law. Tracy, if possible, could you send out that section 59-25-10, where it says prohibits board from employing members of immediate family as a teacher with exceptions? It's highlighted at the, under our legal references.
B3.
Yep, just so we
it's
can.
just, I mean, there's so many positions in our district,
'Cause
but
it does seem
just
in-
teachers.
Yeah, it does seem a little.
So like a librarian's okay, or a front office staff's okay?
It does seem a little odd
But
that
not a
it's
teacher.
placed in there. So I would say, committee members, review that code of law, prior to our next meeting, so we can speak to that as
The
well.
nepotism part.
Yep, the
Okay.
nepotism part.
So do you want to take these last 2 minutes to do our next meeting date?
Yep, so as promised, we will put a hard stop in it, at this point.
You get 4 more?
We just have 4 more of this section, so we do have to table, yes. All right. So, committee, do I hear a motion to table, policies BD, BD-R, BDD, and BDD-R, for our next committee meeting?
I so move.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Before we adjourn, if we could also look at these dates regarding the next committee meeting for available times. You have some proposed dates in front of you. Is there any that stand out? Let's just pay particular attention to April.
Okay.
Anything in April stand out?
Thursday, the 7th is, of those 3, I could do that one, Thursday, the 7th.
Okay,
Yeah, the 8th might be a little tricky for me.
okay. But April 7th is good?
Yes.
Good?
Yes.
Okay. So we will tentatively put down on the schedule Thursday, April 7th from 9 to 11 for our next committee meeting.
I will just make note, that's the day after we have that early morning meeting, right? Is that correct?
Oh,
That's the
just
fifth.
kidding. That's
Yep.
Tuesday. Got it.
Isn't that the 5th?
I think so.
It is.
Is the 5th optional, since we're already here? Or is that one tight? Nope, okay, all right.